The Scratchcard Man. It was a fresh summer's evening, and the dried, worn grass crunched under Scratchcard Man's sensible footwear as he made his way over to the red brick modern housing estate. He smiled to himself as he inhaled the fragrant aroma of roses and lavender that lazily sauntered up from the municipal flower bed, and he chuckled whilst bending to fuss the fluffy grey tomcat that had been following him. Yes, he had a good feeling about tonight. The weather was clement, and windows were open to allow the fragrant summer air unhindered access to the small modern builds that filled this particular estate. People would be relaxed and in a more welcoming mood than if it had been lashing down with rain or blustery with a gale. When the weather was rough, they just battered down the hatches and ignored his friendly rat-a-tat as he walked his rounds, purveying the little scratch cars that could liberate them from their mundane lives, with promises of an instantaneous win of £10,000, tax-free. Scratchcard Man beamed at the idea of their delighted faces after scratching off a winning number. There'd be the hesitation, as they wondered whether it was in fact correct. Then their mouth would start to edge up into a tentative smile, and they would get that little excited tremble in their shoulders before they glanced up at him with such a look of wonder and joy. They would thank him in such a profuse manner that he would bashfully have to say he was just doing his job, and that they now needed to contact the promoters, whose web address could be found on the back of the scratch card, before he waved a cheery goodbye and happily carried on to the next address on his list. That was how he imagined it. As of yet, there had been no winners, but there was time. There must be one somewhere, perhaps in this estate. It was new to him. It was on the neatly typed list that he received just that morning from the promoters. He didn't know what they promoted, he didn't really care. All he knew was that they sent him the scratch cards and the list of houses that he had to visit. The rest was up to him. Spread a little happiness in his corner of an otherwise dull, bleak earth. Oh, and what happiness he spread indeed! As he walked from house to house, children would follow him as if he was some modern Pied Piper. "The Scratchcard Man, the Scratchcard Man," they would sing as he travelled along the jostling streets and narrow alleys. The smiles of the young always brought him so much joy. Their innocence hadn't yet been sullied by the corruption and wickedness that polluted the world these days. He knew that to be the case because it had been said so on breakfast television and in the newspapers. Scratchcard Man allowed himself a little frown at that thought, but rapidly pushed the grey cloud of gloom away as he rounded a corner to the first row of houses on his list. This was a new customer. New customers always bought well. He guessed it was because they were just so glad to have someone reach out to them and offer them a way out of their humdrum, downtrodden lives. He could not begin to imagine what it must be like for the poor souls. One of the couple out all day, working a thankless task for a pittance of pay, whilst the other was trapped at home with their housework, confined by four small walls, whilst the smartly dressed people of daytime television smiled at how wonderful it was that they were moving to a much larger, swankier house in the country. Scratchcard Man could only think that it must induce such debilitating despair. Imagine the doldrums it would cast the poor couple down into. There would be tears, there would be rows. Heaven forbid there could even be divorce. Scratchcard Man shook his head sadly, then drew a deep breath, smiled his bestest, smiliest smile, and knocked brightly on the faded wooden door that was in desperate need of a new coat of paint. He was here to change their life for the better. He waited patiently as he listened to the approaching footsteps and the rattling of the door handle. His bestest, smiliest smile was fit to burst with pride from his face when the door swung inwards and a petite young woman peered around its protective shield. "Hello?" she inquired. "Can I help you?" "Scratchcard Man," beamed Scratchcard Man. The young woman looked perplexed. She pushed her stray dark hair back behind her ear. "I'm sorry, I don't—" "You're new. You're on my list." He pulled his neatly typed list out from his inside pocket and presented it to her with overwhelming glee. She frowned as her eyes wandered over the blank piece of tatty A4 paper. Nervously, she backed his way inside and made to shut the door. Scratchcard Man would not be deterred from his mission of charity. This poor woman needed saving from her mundane lifestyle. "New buyers always buy well," he explained seriously, as he wedged his sensible shoe against the bottom of the door. The woman became frantic. She shoved hard against the door, trying to dislodge the intruder's foot. However, she was slight, and he was much taller and did not budge. "New buyers always buy well," Scratchcard Man tutted, as he waved the brightly coloured scratch cards in front of her. "You can win up to £10,000, tax-free. There is a web address on the back for the promoters." The woman stared in disbelief at the neatly trimmed pieces of cereal box that the madman was waggling manically in front of her. She drew back her arm and made to slap him or push him backwards. But the crazy guy was too quick, and he grabbed her hand as it swung towards him. "Your mundane existence is just unacceptable," Scratchcard Man sighed, as he tucked his little cardboard tickets to freedom away. "I have come to liberate you." With that, he reached inside his jacket, and there was a vicious flash of steel in the evening sun. The woman sank back into the doorway. Her stomach felt wet, and everything was going grey. Scratchcard Man tidied up and quietly closed the door behind him, so as not to disturb the poor woman. She must have been very sleepy to nod off like that. He replaced the knife in his inside pocket and drew out the list as he walked away from the house. He smiled with glee as he saw there was another new customer just down the road. New customers always bought well. Another mundane life to liberate. He had been right. This was going to be a very good evening indeed.